ERCP. Without me saying anything, can you tell the difference in those two images based on the equipment that's being used?
Yeah.
That's your main thing to look out for when you're comparing a T-tube versus an ERCP. T-tube is going to have this very thin T-tube. Now it's very nicely labeled for you on this image. It's not going to be labeled on your test, but your T-tube is going to be that very thin tube. It actually comes to a T thing into that duct right there, that common hepatic duct, versus the ERCP. That's what it looks like, because they have a little, like a tapeworm in their belly, like a snake almost. It's that very thick duodenoscope. So no difference between those two. Anatomy-wise, this is going to be the same anatomy that we went over in that first chapter at the beginning of the semester. Make sure you know the difference between your right and left hepatic duct. That's going to be the uppermost portions of your biliary tree. The right goes over here, the left goes over here, and they do branch out. Keep that in mind. I will expand the box to cover that whole area. I'm not just going to make a tiny box right here. All this is the right hepatic duct. All this is the left hepatic duct. They do branch out quite far, depending on how much contrast has been inserted into that biliary system. They come together and converge to that common hepatic duct you see right here. That's where that T-tube is fitting into, as a matter of fact. As it goes down towards the duodenum, it becomes that common bile duct. Now, if you look over on the right, this one shows the actual gallbladder lit up quite a bit because there's more contrast within it. Remember, this bottom portion of the gallbladder right here is going to be the fundus. The portion where the bile starts dumping into that common hepatic duct is going to be your cystic duct right here. It narrows. Here's those same two pieces of anatomy, the right hepatic duct, the left hepatic duct. They converge together to the common hepatic duct. When you go below the cystic duct, even though this arrow is way down here, going below the cystic duct is the common bile duct. From here all the way down to here, when it starts emptying into the duodenum. You don't need to know main pancreatic duct, even though that has that labeled for you right there. What I want you guys to focus on are your right and left hepatic ducts, your common hepatic duct, your cystic duct, the gallbladder itself, the fundus, and the common bile duct. That's the main ones I want you to know for this test. Does it make sense so far? You okay? Let's go down to this image right here. This is going to be a hysterosalpingogram. This is all the anatomy I want you guys to focus on for this anatomy. Of course, the most superior portion of the uterus right here is going to be the fundus of the uterus. This area right here, with its arrows pointing to, is going to be your corpus or body. I should say corpus, by the way, not corpus. I apologize. Right below the corpus is the isthmus, and the area that narrows right here, where the actual catheter is inserted, is going to be the cervix. Then you have the two sides of your fallopian tubes. The portion that is closest to the uterus is going to be the isthmus. The mid portion, right here, where it's curving, is the ampulla. And then the portion where the little finger-like projections are is the infundibulum. So infundibulum is where those little finger-like projections begin. Ampulla is the midsection. The area closest to the uterus itself is going to be the isthmus section of the fallopian tube. Making sense so far still? Questions on that? All the anatomy you see labeled in this image is what I expect you to label on the image review exam, as far as the hysterosalpingogram goes. By the way, whenever we're looking at this exam and the dye is spilling out of the fimbriae, is that good or bad?
Good.
That's good, because it tells us that the fallopian tube is open. If it's not spilling out, that means it is blocked. Probably going to see that question. It's a really good test question. Now, as far as the rest of the images goes, guys, most of this is going to be anatomy we've went over before. You may see an arthrogram knee. You may see an arthrogram shoulder. You'll probably see both, if I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, this anatomy is going to be exactly the same as if we were just looking at a regular x-ray of the knee. Therefore, all the anatomy we've talked about before is going to be fair game. You have the top of the patella, which is the base, the bottom, which is the apex, your patellofemoral joints, superimposed condyles, tibial plateau. If you look on the AP view here, guys, you have your epicondyles on either side, your condyles on either side. By the way, this is going to be your lateral condyle, medial condyle. Look for the fibula. The fibula is not on this image, but I would give you an image that has a fibula, by the way. Fibula is the lateral side of the knee. Epicondyle, condyle, tibial plateaus, the intercondylar eminence in the middle, and of course the femur and the tibia right here. As far as the shoulder goes, guys, same anatomy as we've gone over. Make sure you review that shoulder anatomy. You'll probably see an image very similar to this on your tests. Make sure you can tell whether it's an external or internal rotation without me telling you anything at all. What kind of rotation is that shoulder in right there? External. How do you know it's external? Because this right here, the greater tubercle, is in profile. That's your key aspect. Head of your humerus, of course, right here. There's two necks on the humerus, if you remember. The neck that is closest to the head is called what?
Anatomical.
The neck down here. Very good. What is the area right here if I'm talking about the joint space? Oh, what? The joint space. If I'm asking for the joint, it is scapulohumeral. If I'm asking for the landmark,
Glenoid fossa.
glenoid fossa, glenoid cavity, correct. I can see it on your test today too, by the way. Hint, hint. This right here would be what, guys? Coracoid. Over here, acromion. What's the joint here? What end of the clavicle is this? Acromial end. Acromial end. And then if I'm asking you, what is the joint space that's filled with contrast called? Same answer as before. Just different way of asking. What's the joint space that's filled up here with contrast? What's that called? Scapulohumeral joint space. And what kind of joint is that? Synovial.
Socket.
Making sense so far?
Yep.
Oh, by the way, what is this on the scapula? What is this right here?
Lateral border.
The what?
Lateral
The
border.
lateral border, or also called the what? Has another name. Axillary border. Axillary border, good. For a myelogram, guys, know your anatomy as far as an L-spine goes. You will see an L-spine image. I'm going to give you an L-spine myelogram. I won't say it again. I'll give you an L-spine myelogram, a lumbar myelogram, so know your L-spine anatomy. Know how to number your vertebrae. Know your spinous processes. Know your transverse processes. Your intervertebral disc space. Your pedicles. All the stuff in that L-spine area we've talked about before. And if I'm pointing to the contrast-filled area, or if I ask you to point to it, I'm going to ask you to point to the contrast-filled spinal cord, which is very easy. That would be this whole region you see right here that's filled with contrast. Make sense? What is the tail end of the spinal cord called?
Conus medullaris.
The conus medullaris. So if I ask you to label the conus medullaris, you're going to put it right here, guys, at the point. See where I got my cursor? That's going to be your conus medullaris. What is the most common area that we inject contrast for myelograms?
L3, L4.
L3, L4. It's a really good fact to know as well. And then the last kind of image you might get, guys, is going to be an orthorhynchogram right here, or a long bone study. A lot of anatomy in that whole area, as you can imagine. It's all the anatomy in the hip, all the anatomy in the pelvis, all the way down the femur, all the way down to the ankles. All this is fair game on stuff we've talked about before. For example, if I point right here, that's going to be your lateral malleolus, medial malleolus, your ankle joint, also called the Mortise joint. Don't forget you have two joints on the tibia and fibula. You have the proximal tib fib, distal tib fib. You, of course, have your tibial plateaus, your intercondylar eminence, your condyles and epicondyles. Don't forget about your trochanters, greater and lesser. Your femoral neck, head, acetabulum. Another important one to make sure you remember. What would that be right there, guys? That most inferior portion of the pelvis. It's one I always ask you about. Ischial tuberosity. If I'm pointing to the area closer to the pubic symphysis, it's what? Inferior ramus. On top would be the superior ramus. Obturator foramina. And can't really see it on this image. What is that right there, guys? Please tell me what that is, because you're going to see that today. I'm just saying. I'm telling you right now, you're going to see this today on your test. The as is. The as is. Please not label that as is. I told y'all you're going to see it again. I promise you you're going to see it again today. Know where that as is located. Is that making sense overall what I'm asking, guys? All that's fair game. It's all review of what you've seen before. Once again, this is called an orthorhynchogram, if you see it as a question. Orthorhynchogram or a long bone study. You can go by both names. This is your lumbar myelogram, shoulder arthrogram, knee arthrogram, hysterosalpingogram, and then definitely no difference between these two, that being your T-tube cholangiogram versus your ERCP. T-tube versus ERCP. Key aspect is the way that tube looks. ERCP looks like a big snake in their belly. T-tube is a very thin tube that ends with an actual T right here. Any questions on the image labeling? Does that make sense overall? What I'm looking for? We okay on that? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Yes, no? Y'all nervous about these tests today, aren't you? Y'all are really quiet. I'm gonna give you some study time, don't worry. We're gonna do one more quick review. I do have a little quiz for you guys, just to show you the kind of questions I'll ask on this test on Thursday. So we'll do that together, then I'll let you guys have some study time. Sound good? And this is in your email, by the way. I did send these images to you in your email. If you have any more questions, just let me know. I'll be glad to answer them for you. Let's see. Here we go, guys. You can go ahead and join up. And we'll do a little review. It's about 20 multiple choice questions, just to kind of show you what kind of questions you can expect on Thursday. All right, code is right there, guys. Joinmyquiz.com. There's your game code. Let's see how you do. Sphenoid strut. It's pretty good. I haven't seen that before. What is that? I don't want to look at those. That's